Welcome everyone, here and on Zoom. Where'd Ken go?
And step out.
The theme of the upcoming spring Ango will be creative ways of practice. That'll be late March through late June. Creative ways of practice. That'll include the arts, such as in the upcoming Bountiful Earth session later this month, in which there'll be some periods of guided art practice. And also the Awakening with Sound session that'll be happening later in April, and in which there'll be sparsely played musical instruments and also occasional pieces of recorded music. The arts. Creative ways of creative practice. Yeah, there's also going to be other offerings during Spring Ango on the theme of creative ways of practice. And it's also clarifying to consider how we might bring creativity into our usual forms of practice, our usual zazen, dharma study, chanting services, and so forth, and to our life of practice in general. The dictionary says that to create is to bring something into existence. In the arts, that could be drawings and sculpture, paintings, poems or novels, songs, music, dance, bringing that into existence. The artist creates those things. And in our Zen practice, and in our recent history here in Sangha, Mushin and many others created this Zen center. They brought it into existence. The gardening crew brings lovely landscapes into existence. The Tenzo brings delicious and beautiful food into existence. Housekeepers bring cleanliness and order into existence here at Sangha. The flower crew brings beautiful bouquets to all the altars. It seems like every week, and so on. And there's so much creativity that happens here in our world of practice, our life of practice. And there's also creativity in our zazen, in our dharma study, in our precepts practice, or other practices, when they bring new understanding, new perspectives, new ways of seeing and being, new awareness into existence in our lives. That's creativity. We create something new in our view of the world, our view of ourselves that wasn't there before. Artists hone their crafts in support of their creative expression. Mixing paints, learning lithographic processes, learning how to carve stone and wood, how to cast or weld metal, playing an instrument, opening the voice to song, moving the body for dance. Mastery of their craft enables artists to express their vision more completely, more wholly. And mastery of their craft also opens up new possibilities for their vision. Oh, I can do that with stone. I can make this image. I can realize some other vision. And in this analogy between art and Zen, We can consider how Zen practices might be analogous to artistic crafts in supporting our own constantly evolving realization of the Buddha way. Keeping in mind that Dogen considered Zazen to be not just a means to an end. We don't sit Zazen because someday we're going to awaken. Dogen called it Zazen. Practice realization. Realization. Practice realization. The act of Zazen itself being an expression of realization, an expression of awakening. And he teaches that this is true for the beginner, the first-time practitioner, just as much as it is for someone who's practiced all their lives. When you said Zazen, it's an expression of awakened mind. In a book called The Art of Just Sitting, one of the last chapters called Come Sit With Me. He talks about sometimes there can be a shift in our old way of feeling or thinking about something or someone, that our old way of thinking shifts or falls apart or fades away in some way. And we can open up, break apart, break open to a new awareness, a new understanding that's emerged, that's come into existence, that is somehow created. A mysterious process. It's not a cookbook. We don't go through various steps of practicing the Eightfold Path and doing the right mindfulness practices and doing the right jhana concentration practices, and we get there. That's not how we do it in Zen. But how does it happen? Certainly there's a place for Dharma study, for thoughtful reflection, for contemplation, in finding new perspectives, and finding new information, and new understanding, and new teachings. All of that's worthwhile. And yet there's also a tenet of our tradition that says the ultimate is not found through words and phrases. We have other practices besides Dharma study that's not so much about figuring out how things are as they are about ways of being. Practices like mindful awareness, loving kindness, generosity, patience, forgiveness, curiosity, kind speech. And just as artists' tools and techniques support them in bringing new works of art into existence and helps them be creative, likewise our practices support us in bringing new ways of being, new ways of understanding to existence, creating in our practice, being creative, letting go of the old, opening up to something different that we haven't seen before. I have an old friend that I've known for decades. At times over the years I've sort of been impatient with them or taken them for granted or dismissed them in some way. Recently they were diagnosed with an incurable disease, and it completely shifted my view of them and my relationship to them. You know, and there's a way in which my old orientation, my emotional stance has fallen apart. Clarified maybe. And a new relationship has come into existence. At least from my side, it's new. It's come out of this direct experience. It's not of a cognitive process, a direct experience of seeing someone else's suffering, someone who's dear to me, and someone that I want to take care of. What kind of shifts or subtle changes of viewpoint have you experienced? What new ways have you seen your life and your world and your friends? How have you gotten beyond your usual points of view? And how did that happen, these shifts? Investigation of the nature of reality is one of the 7 factors of enlightenment that the Buddha teaches about. This is about curiosity about what is real. What is real? It's kind of arrogant to think we know exactly what is real about everything, what is true and real about everything in existence. So, it's worthwhile to wonder. Look into it. And this investigation applies equally to something that Buddha called 2 truths. The absolute truth and the relative truth. He taught a number of absolute truths, you might call them universal truths in his teachings. For example, that there are 3 marks of existence common to all beings, which are suffering, impermanence, and no self. Suffering, impermanence, and no self. Those are absolute truths that the Buddha taught over the decades of his teaching. And he told his disciples again and again not to take his word for it. He urged them to look into their own lives and their own experiences, curious about whether this teaching is true. Is it true that there's suffering? Is it true that there's impermanence? And a really difficult one, is it true that there's no self? He wanted them to look into it, investigate it. And at the same time that there's universal truth, there's also relative truth. At the same time that Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, as it says in one of our chants. It exists here and now. It pervades the whole universe, and it exists here and now. The universal and the relative. At the same time that there's the absolute truth of no self, there's the relative truth of our particular so-called self, our memories, our experience of life, our body, our own feelings, our history, points of view, beliefs. We all have those things. And that's who we are, right? The Buddha also taught us to question and be curious about and investigate the truth of our relative views. As part of his teaching on the 4 foundations of mindfulness that I talked about before, those 4 being mindfulness of body, sense feelings of the 5 senses, mindfulness of the mind, our general state of awareness, feeling tone of our field of awareness, not even thinking about what we're thinking, not even considering what we're thinking and feeling. And then the fourth one being mindfulness of mind objects. That's thoughts and feelings and memories and plans and everything that goes through our heads 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those are mind objects. Those are the result of history and experience and memory and trauma and desire, anger. And he urges us to investigate those mind objects, to be curious about them, to question them, to not take them as absolute and true. Particularly in light of his other Dharma teachings about, the 3 poisons, and teachings about the 5 hindrances. These, lots of other teachings that he taught us about, that we can relate to what we're thinking. And when we become aware of what we're thinking and feeling, it's like, yeah, Buddha talked about fear. Buddha talked about desire. Buddha talked about doubt, greed. Oh, and I'm expressing all those things all the time in my own mind. The phrase investigation of the nature of reality sort of comes from the teachings of the Buddha as practiced in the Theravadan Buddhist tradition. This was, they honored his early teachings very highly. And in our tradition is Mahayana. This was developed about 500 years after Buddha's life. And it's a different interpretation of the Buddha teachings. And we don't study and practice with that phrase so much, investigating the nature of reality. We have other ways of expressing that, such as Dogen's phrase from the Genjo koan, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. That can include all of our mind objects and all the other 4 foundations of mindfulness. And, we have a phrase like, don't know mind. Don't know mind. No fixed views is another phrase. Or, what is it that's alive? This is a very fundamental koan. What is it? I read one time that in Korean Zen, contrary to in Japan and Chinese Chan, they have a whole sequence of koans that Rinzai, the Buddhist, practiced through this whole curriculum of koans, right? But in Korea they have, according to what I read, 1 koan. What is it? What am I experiencing? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What is it? What is this? That's curiosity. That's investigating the nature of reality, the nature of being, the nature of existence. Also in Theravada Buddhism, the practice of investigating the nature of reality is commonly done along with the practice of the Brahma Viharas. That is to say, the 4 divine abodes, which are 4 facets of the heart of love. Compassion, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Practicing this investigation with compassion and loving kindness for oneself and for all beings. It's not just like investigating, analyzing itself. It's also about compassion, caring about, suffering with, loving and being kind. Here are a few Zen stories about ancestors investigating the nature of reality. It's said that Bodhidharma made the 2-year journey from India to China. This is about 500 BC. That's 1,000 years after the time of Buddha. No, 500 CE, excuse me. Buddha was 500 BC. Bodhidharma was 500 AD. And he arrived in southern China at a port city, they say. The story wasn't written down until 250 years after Bodhidharma's life. So we take it with a grain of salt. The emperor of the southern dynasty was Emperor Wu, and he heard about this Indian monk that lived in his kingdom. And he summoned Bodhidharma for an audience with him. And the emperor told Bodhidharma that he'd built many temples, which he had, and he'd funded many monasteries, which he had. And he asked Bodhidharma how much merit had he gained from all of his giving. Bodhidharma replied, "No merit." He was very gruff, and he probably didn't know Chinese all that well either. The emperor's concept of gaining merit came from early Buddhism, when the ordained were considered the only ones dedicated enough to be able to gain liberation or awakening or enlightenment. And that lay people gained merit for favorable rebirth into future lives by providing support to monastics. So this is sort of this idea of merit. How much merit did the Emperor Wu gain by supporting all these monastics? But Bodhidharma was a Mahayana monk, and apparently he didn't hold on to that ancient view of merit. And maybe, well, I don't know about rebirth. So the emperor continued questioning Bodhidharma, and he asked him, "What is the true meaning of the holy Dharma?" And Bodhidharma replied in his fashion, "It's empty, not holy." So Bodhidharma was a messenger of emptiness. This is a Mahayana view of the world, an emphasis on emptiness, which is related to the truth of impermanence and no self. And it's expressed in the Heart Sutra, which we often chant. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practicing prajna paramita, clearly saw that all 5 aggregates are empty, and thus relieved all suffering. Yes. Emptiness relieves suffering. Yeah. Anyway, the emperor apparently wasn't familiar with this view. He thought that there was true meaning. Well, we all need to investigate that. And then finally the emperor asked, "Who is this monk that stands before me?" And Bodhidharma answered, "I don't know." Bodhidharma seems to have been a master of don't know mind, which was highly valued in Zen. A master of investigating the nature of reality, and something that might have been unfamiliar to the emperor. The emperor probably didn't say, "I don't know," very often. He probably said, "This is what I say. Do it." And if the emperor experienced the creation of new awareness as a result of his encounter with Bodhidharma, it's not talked about in the stories. And after his audience with the Emperor Wu, Bodhidharma traveled to northern China and sat facing a wall for 9 years. And thus he became the founder of Zen, which is the Japanese word for Chan. That's Chinese word for dhyana, which is a Sanskrit word for concentration. Bodhidharma sat facing a wall for 9 years, embodying seated meditation concentration practice. It's the fundamental practice of Zen Buddhists. Then there's the story of Deshan and the tea lady. And this was about 300 years after Bodhidharma. This is in 9th century China. Deshan lived in northern China, and he was a renowned scholar of the Diamond Sutra, which some of us will be studying in this senior student study group next month. The Diamond Sutra includes a teaching that awakening is only possible after lengthy study of the lives of the Buddhas and ancestors. Study, 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 and then you might crack open the egg. And when Deshan heard that there were Chan masters in southern China who taught that such study isn't needed because the mind itself is Buddha. This is a teaching of the Mahayana. The mind itself is Buddha. Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, existing here and now. Buddha nature, here and now. Anyway, he was outraged that these southern Chan would be teaching this heresy, and he set off to teach them the correct view in the south. And he traveled down there, and nearing the end of his journey, Deshan was tired and thirsty, and he went into a tea house for refreshment. And the old woman who ran the tea house, who was familiar with the Chan teachings, learned that Deshan was a scholar of the Diamond Sutra, great scholar of the Diamond Sutra. So the old woman says to Deshan, "I have a question for you, scholar. And if you answer it correctly, I'll give you the tea for free. And if you don't answer it correctly, you have to go somewhere else." And she said, "The Diamond Sutra says, past mind is ungraspable. Future mind cannot be grasped. Present mind cannot be grasped. With which mind will you drink my tea?" And Deshan was dumbfounded. He couldn't answer this question. He had no idea. It wasn't taught in the Diamond Sutra, I guess. And so the old woman sent him off to a Chan master where he studied for a long time and eventually attained the way. And he wasn't so stuck in his usual views that he couldn't see that he didn't know, that he couldn't realize that there was teaching to be had for awakening. And lastly, there's the story of Dongshan and his teacher Yunyan, which is also in 9th century China. And so after practicing with Yunyan for some time, Dongshan was ready to return to his wandering life, as was common in China at that time. Study with a teacher for a while, and you go study with another teacher. And before leaving, he said to Yunyan, "If I'm asked about your teachings, what should I say?" And Yunyan thought for a moment, and he answered, "Just this is it." Dongshan didn't answer. He was still lost in thought. And Yunyan said, "Now you are in charge of this great matter. You must be most thoroughgoing." Dongshan departed on his travels, and he was walking along, and he was crossing a creek, a stream, and he looked down and he saw his reflection in the water. And then he wrote a poem. Just don't seek from others, or you'll be far estranged from self. I now go on alone. Everywhere I meet it. It now is me. I now am not it. One must understand in this way to merge with suchness. I'll read that again. It has echoes of the Precious Mirror Samadhi chant. Just don't seek from others, or you'll be far estranged from self. I now go on alone. Everywhere I meet it. It now is me. I now am not it. One must understand in this way to merge with suchness. Yunyan said 4 words, just this is it. And Dongshan shifted in a major way. Something new was created. Something new came into existence in his mind. He was steeped in the practice of investigating the nature of reality. Those monks walked all over China questioning teachers, questioning themselves. He was steeped in openness of don't know mind. Openness that allows something new to come into existence. Openness, emptiness. Like an open gate that allows you to walk into the garden. Like an open window that lets you see the fields. Like an open teacup that allows you to receive tea. And by the way, the Caodong school of Chan, Chinese Zen, Caodong, was brought to Japan by Dogen and called Soto Zen. That's the tradition of Zen that we practice in. Caodong, the Chinese Soto Zen, was established by Dongshan and his student Kaoshan. Dong and Kao. They created Caodong Soto. So, clarification, opening, a shift of understanding, the release of fixed views, fixed mind optics can happen subtly, or they can have large changes in lifestyle. And how may we foster and practice releasing fixed views and bringing new views, new ways of seeing into existence? This is one way to approach Spring-anga, creative ways of practice. There are many possible ways, as many ways as there are people in this room or in this audience or in the world. One way might be to apply curious, open, non-judgmental awareness of everything that's going through our minds, our everyday experiences, and questioning. What is it? What is this thought? What is this feeling? And what Dharma teachings might shed light on it? What am I thinking? What are my thoughts and feelings demonstrate Dharma truths? If I'm fearful, that demonstrates the teaching of the Buddha. If I'm angry, that does. Another possible way of opening is to silently ask a question in Zazen. Something that you're really curious about. or you really need to know, just ask it in your mind and then let it go. And just hold your awareness open and just sit. Hold your awareness and just be aware of what comes up. It's like quietly making a lap, holding still, and seeing if a cat will come and walk and sit in your lap. This is what this question and release is like. We're not forcefully fabricating an answer. We're opening up to what comes. Another way might be to ask for help from the Buddhas and ancestors when we're struggling, and be open to seeing subtle ways in which help is provided. Or another way of opening and releasing might be practicing in sesshin, which I, like a broken record, I keep encouraging you all to do that. Multi-day, silent, all day long meditation practice with group meals and work practice. Sesshin is a wonderful container for releasing and opening. And Ango is a period of intense practice. That's one of the natures of Ango. This will be the first season in which Sangha Jewel has organized Ango practice, but it's been done since the time of the Buddha, inspired by when the monsoon rains hit in South Asia, and all of these wandering mendicant monks and nuns were out in the rain, and so they gathered together in sheltered places to talk about the Buddha and practice together. And it was a period of more intense practice and Sangha practice. So here we are, Sangha Jewel, and we're going to practice Ango this spring. And it's traditional for people to commit to doing something more in their practice than they have normally been doing. And there's a way in which we might have some recommendations about what you should do, but really you need to decide for yourself something extra that you want to do to deepen your practice. So please see the notice in the newsletter about the Spring Ango commitment. There's a place you can tap on it, you can see what might be recommended and so forth. Consider what you might want to add to your practice from March 21st to June 20th. Those are the official dates of the start and stop of Spring Ango 2026 at Sangha Jewel Zen Center on the theme of creative ways of practice. And please do participate if you possibly can. And may your practice go well. Do your best and keep going.